You can't just walk away from this, Ryan. Not after everything.
I stood there like an idiot, holding her groceries over the fence, watching her eyes dance with something I couldn't name. Alina had just whispered words that made my stomach flip, then pretend I am 3 seconds ago. I had made a joke about taking her out if she were younger. Now she was calling my bluff, and I had no idea what to do next. My name is Ryan. I am Vushjevon. 6 months ago I signed divorce papers in a lawyer's office that smelled like old coffee and regret my ex-wife Sarah told me I was boring. Predictable, someone who never took risks. Maybe she was right. I moved to Maple Grove looking for the opposite of excitement. A place where I could fix up my small house, go to work, come home and not think about how I'd failed at the one thing I thought I'd gotten right. The neighborhood was perfect for hiding. Quiet streets and people who waved but didn't ask questions. Then I met Alina. She lives across the street in a blue house with white shutters. I noticed her the first week pulling weeds in her garden, her dark hair tied back, moving with a kind of grace that made me forget I was supposed to be unpacking boxes. She looked up once, caught me staring, and smiled. Not the polite neighbor smile, something warmer. I looked away fast, feeling like a kid caught stealing cookies. Our first real conversation happened because my lawnmower died. I was standing in my driveway, sweating through my shirt, trying to figure out why the stupid thing wouldn't start. She walked over with a glass of lemonade. "You're flooding the engine," she said. "Let it sit for 10 minutes. I must have looked confused because she laughed. "My dad taught me. He said a woman should know how to fix things so she never has to wait for a man to do it." She was right. 10 minutes later, the mower started on the first pull. I tried to return her glass that evening, but she waved me off. "Keep it, I have plenty." The next week I borrowed her hedge trimmer, then her ladder, then she brought over cookies because she'd made too many. I started finding excuses to be outside when she got home from work. She's a teacher at the middle school, 8th grade English. She told me once that she loved watching kids discover books that made them feel less alone. I understood that more than I wanted to admit. We fell into a pattern. Morning coffee on my porch, sometimes quick conversations across the street. She told me about her separation. Her husband David had left 8 months ago for someone he met at his gym. 22 years of marriage, gone because he wanted to feel young again. The way she said it without tears, just tired acceptance, made me angry at a man I'd never met. I told her about Sarah, about how she'd said I'd stopped dreaming, stopped wanting more from life. Alina looked at me for a long moment. "Maybe you were just dreaming about the wrong things that hit different." This afternoon started normal. I saw her struggling with paper bags from her car, groceries sliding around. I jogged over without thinking. She handed me one bag, then another. Her fingers brushed mine. "My hero," she said, teasing. That's when my mouth moved faster than my brain. "If you were my age, I'd take you out tonight." I made it as a joke, a way to lighten the moment. But her expression shifted. She stepped closer, close enough that I could smell her perfume, something light and clean. "Then pretend I am," she whispered. My heart hammered. Behind her, I saw Mrs. Chen slow down on her evening walk. Her eyes locked on us like we're the most interesting thing she'd seen all year. Alina noticed, too. Her jaw tightened. "Help me carry these inside." It wasn't really a question. We walked to her front door, not talking. I could feel Mrs. Chen's stare burning into my back. Inside, her house smelled like vanilla candles and something baking. Photos lined the hallway, her wedding picture, her kids grown now and living in different states. It was a life I was walking through like an uninvited guest. She set her bags on the kitchen counter. I put mine next to hers. "Thank you," she said. But she wouldn't look at me. "Alina," she turned. Her eyes were bright, maybe with tears, maybe with something else. "People are already talking. Ryan, Mrs. Chen will tell everyone she knows that you were in my house. They'll make it into something it's not. What if it is something?" The words came out before I could stop them. She laughed, but it sounded sad. "You don't know what you're saying. I am just me. You're starting over. The last thing you need is a complication like me. You're not a complication." Then what I'm into didn't have an answer, not one that made sense. She walked me to the door, her hand resting briefly on my arm. "Your porch light is out," she said, changing the subject. "I noticed last night. I have a spare bulb if you need one. I'll fix it tomorrow." "You don't have to. I want to." She smiled, small and real. "Okay." I made it halfway down her driveway when she called my name. I turned. She stood in the doorway, backlit by the warm glow of her house. "Ryan, you said tonight. Where would we go?" My throat went dry. "Anywhere you wanted." She nodded slowly, like she was testing the weight of my words. "That's a dangerous answer." Then she closed the door. I didn't sleep. I lay in bed staring at my ceiling, replaying everything, her whisper, the way she looked at me, the impossible question she'd asked as I left. Around midnight, I heard her wind chimes through my open window, soft, steady, like they were trying to tell me something I wasn't smart enough to understand. The next day, I went to the hardware store and bought a new bulb for her porch light. I also grabbed one for mine. When I got home, her car was gone. I crossed the street anyway and checked her light fixture. The bulb wasn't burned out. It had been unscrewed just enough to break the connection. Someone had turned it off on purpose. I twisted it back into place, tested it, and it worked fine. When Alina got home that evening, she parked and saw me sitting on her front steps. "Did you break into my house?" she asked, but she was smiling. "Your porch light wasn't broken, just loose." She set her bag down, studying me. "And you couldn't just tell me that?" "I wanted to fix it." "Why?" "Because you said it was out." "Because I told you I would." She sat down next to me, close enough that our shoulders almost touched. "Most people say things they don't mean. I'm not most people." She laughed softly. "No, you're not." That became our routine. Every morning I'd make coffee and she'd appear on my porch around 7 o'clock. We'd talk about nothing important, her students, my job at the architecture firm, the weather-safe topics that let us pretend we weren't circling something neither of us knew how to name, but the neighborhood noticed. Mrs. Chen started parking her car on the street instead of her driveway, giving her a better view of both our houses. The Rodriguezes next door stopped inviting Alina to their weekend barbecue. At work, my colleague Mark cornered me by the coffee machine. "So, you're pretty tight with your neighbor, huh?" His grin made my skin crawl. "The good-looking one with the blue house. We're friends, right?" He drew the word out. "Just be careful, man. People talk. Wouldn't want things getting weird." I wanted to ask what he meant, but I already knew. That weekend, I washed my truck in the driveway. The sun was brutal, heat rising off the pavement in waves. I was scrubbing the tailgate when I heard her voice. "You missed a spot." I turned. Alina stood at the edge of my driveway holding 2 bottles of water. She wore a sundress, yellow with small white flowers. Her hair was down where I asked. She pointed at the hood. "Right there. Big smudge." I squinted. There was no smudge. "I don't see it." "Then you're not looking close enough." She walked over, handed me a water, and took the sponge from my hand. She wiped a spot on the hood that was already clean, then leaned against the truck, looking at me. "Why do you keep doing this?" "Washing my truck." "No. Coming around, talking to me, fixing things. You can make friends with anyone on this street. The Patels have a son your age. The Kims throw parties every month. But you keep showing up at my door." I opened my water, buying time. "Maybe I like your company." "Why?" "Because you don't treat me like I'm broken just because I got divorced. Because you laugh at my bad jokes. Because when I'm around you, I don't feel like I have to pretend to be okay." Her eyes softened. She looked down at her hands. "People are talking about us. Ryan, I heard Mrs. Chen at the grocery store yesterday. She told the cashier she thinks it's inappropriate. A young man spending so much time with an older woman. She used the word shameful." Heat flooded my face, but it wasn't from the sun. "She doesn't know anything about you. It doesn't matter. She's decided who I am, who we are, and who's that." Elena's voice dropped. "A lonely older woman taking advantage of a young man's kindness. Or maybe she thinks you're using me for something. Either way, we're a story now." I stepped closer. "Let them talk. You say that like it's easy. It's not. But I don't care what Mrs. Chen thinks." "You should." Her voice cracked. "Because I do. Because I have to live here. Because at my age, I'm supposed to know better than to feel this way about someone who should be off building a life with someone appropriate." "Appropriate?" She gestured between us. "You know what I mean." "No, I don't." She pushed off the truck, frustrated. "You're 29, Ryan. I am just a me. Do the math. When you're 40, I'll be almost 60. When you're 50, I'll be old. Really old. That's the reality you're not thinking about." "I think about it all the time." That stopped her. "What I think about it every single day. I think about how you make me laugh, how you listen when I talk, how you look at me like I matter. I think about age and what people say and how this doesn't make sense on paper. And then I think about how none of that changes the fact that I'd rather have 5 real minutes with you than 5 years pretending with someone else." She stared at me. The street was quiet except for a dog barking somewhere and the distant hum of a lawnmower. "You can't say things like that." "Why not?" "Because I might start believing you." Her voice was barely a whisper. "And then what happens when you change your mind?" "I won't. You will. Everyone does." I wanted to argue, but her phone rang. She pulled it from her pocket, glanced at the screen, and her face went pale. I have to take this. She walked back toward her house, already answering. David, no. I told you not to call. I stood there in my driveway, water dripping from the sponge in my hand, watching her disappear into her house. The door closed. The street felt emptier than before. I drove home through the downpour, water streaming down my windshield like the thoughts racing through my mind. When I pulled into my driveway, I sat there for 10 minutes, engine off, just replaying her words. Then pretend I am. My phone buzzed a text from my sister. Mom says, "You're dating an older woman. Is it true?" I didn't answer. I went inside, changed into dry clothes, and tried to sleep. But every time I closed my eyes, I saw Elena's face in that dim hallway, rain in her hair, saying things that made my chest tight. 3 days passed. Her car sat in the driveway, but the lights in her house stayed off. I texted her twice. No response. On the morning of the 4th day, I was pouring coffee when I heard a knock so soft I almost missed it. I opened the door and there she was. Her eyes were red. Her hands shook slightly as she crossed her arms. "Can we talk?" she asked. I stepped aside and let her in. She walked to my living room but didn't sit down. Instead, she stood by the window looking out at the street like she was watching for something. "Everyone knows now," she said quietly. "Knows what?" I asked, though I already understood. "About us. About that night. Mrs. Chen told half the neighborhood. Someone else told Mark at your job yesterday. A woman I barely know stopped me at the grocery store and asked if I was having a midlife crisis." Her voice cracked on the last word. I moved closer, but she held up a hand. "Wait, let me finish." She took a breath. "I thought I could handle this. I've dealt with gossip before, but this feels different because this time it hurt. When people talked about me after my separation, I didn't care. I was already numb. But now I care, Ryan, and that scares me more than anything they could say." I wanted to tell her it would blow over, that people would forget, but she looked at me like she needed the truth, not comfort. "What do you want to do?" I asked. She finally turned away from the window. "I don't know. Part of me wants to ignore them. Part of me wants to move somewhere no one knows my name. And part of me," she paused, "part of me wants to walk across that street every single day just to prove I'm not ashamed." "Then do that," I said. She laughed, but it wasn't a happy sound. "You make it sound simple. You're 29, you don't understand what it's like to be a woman my age falling for someone younger. They don't call you foolish. They don't look at you like you're desperate or predatory or confused. They save that for me." The word falling hung in the air between us. She realized what she'd said and looked down. "I didn't mean to say that, but you did," I said softly. She met my eyes. "Yes, I did." For a moment, neither of us spoke. Outside, a car door slammed, footsteps on pavement. Life continued, like nothing had shifted. "My ex-husband called me yesterday," she said suddenly. "David, he heard about you. He said I was being ridiculous, that I was embarrassing myself, that people were laughing at me." Anger flared in my chest. "What did you tell him?" "I told him to mind his own life, since he'd done such a terrible job with ours." A small smile touched her lips. "He didn't like that." I stepped closer. "Alina, I don't care what David thinks. I don't care what Mrs. Chen thinks. I don't even care what Mark thinks, and he's trying to mess with my career. The only person whose opinion matters to me is yours." She looked at me for a long time, and then she closed the distance between us. Her hand found mine, fingers threading through fingers. "I'm terrified," she whispered. "Of what?" "Of this of you. Of how much I want something I was sure I'd never want again." Her thumb traced circles on my palm. "I spent 2 years convincing myself I was fine alone, that wanting someone was weakness, that needing someone was dangerous. And then you moved here with your broken porch light and your ridiculous confidence. And suddenly, I'm 48 years old, feeling like I'm 20 again. And I don't know if that's beautiful or tragic. Maybe it's both," I said. "Maybe the best things always are." She laughed quietly, and this time it sounded real. "You always know what to say." "Not always. Right now I have no idea what comes next." She squeezed my hand. "Neither do I, but I know I don't want to spend the rest of my life wondering what would have happened if I'd been brave enough to find out." Thunder rumbled in the distance, even though the rain had stopped hours ago. She looked toward the sound, then back at me. "If we do this, really do this, it won't be easy. People will talk. Your job might suffer. My friends will question my judgment. Your family will think I'm taking advantage of you." "Let them think it," I said. "I'm not a kid. I know what I want. Do you?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Because wanting something and living with the cost of it are two different things." I pulled her closer. "Then I guess we'll find out together." She didn't leave that night. We sat on my couch until dawn, talking about everything we'd been too scared to say out loud. She told me about her marriage, how it had fallen apart slowly, like a house settling on a weak foundation. I told her about my divorce, how my ex-wife had said I loved the idea of love more than I loved her. Maybe she was right, I admitted, but this doesn't feel like an idea. This feels real. Alina rested her head on my shoulder. Real things break, she said. I know, but at least they existed. When sunlight started creeping through the blinds, she stood up. I should go before the neighborhood wakes up and sees my car still here. I walked her to the door. She paused on my front step, looking back at me. Thank you for listening. Thank you for coming over. She smiled, tired but genuine. I'll see you later. You know where I live. She walked across the street, and I watched until she disappeared inside her house. I went back inside and fell asleep on the couch, still wearing yesterday's clothes. The next few weeks were strange. Some neighbors stopped waving. Mrs. Chen would stare openly now, not even pretending to be subtle. At work, Mark started making little comments. How's your social life, Ryan? Still close with your neighbor? I ignored him, but it wore on me. Alina felt it worse. One evening I found her sitting on her back patio in the dark. What are you doing out here? I asked, climbing over the low fence between our yards. Hiding, she said simply. From who? Everyone. Mrs. Chen drove by 3 times today. Slow, staring like she's gathering evidence for something. I sat down beside her. Maybe she's just nosy. Or maybe she's right to stare. Maybe we are something worth staring at. Her voice sounded hollow. I took her hand. Hey, look at me, she did, reluctantly. We're not doing anything wrong. Then why does it feel like we are? She asked. Why do I feel like I have to explain myself every time I leave my house? Why did my own daughter call yesterday and ask if I was okay? Like being happy is a symptom of something broken. I didn't have an answer for that, so I just held her hand and sat with her in the dark. After a while, she spoke again. My daughter's coming to visit next weekend. She wants to meet you. My heart jumped. She does. She says if you're important to me, she should know who you are. I think she's really coming to judge whether you're using me or I'm having some kind of crisis. And what do you think? She looked at me, eyes soft in the darkness. I think I don't care anymore. I'm tired of being afraid. The following Saturday, I met her daughter, Sophie. She was 24, sharpened, protective. We had lunch at a small cafe downtown, away from the neighborhood. Sophie asked me direct questions. What were my intentions? Did I understand how hard this would be for her mum? Was I prepared for people to assume the worst? I answered honestly. I cared about Alina. I knew people would talk. I was ready to deal with it. Sophie studied me for a long moment, then turned to her mum. You're happy? Alina nodded. I am. Then I'm happy for you. Sophie's voice was firm. But if you hurt her, I'll make your life miserable. I believed her. After Sophie left, Alina and I walked through a park near the cafe. Children played on swings. Couples sat on benches. Everything felt normal, easy. Your daughter's intimidating, I said. Alina laughed. She gets that from me. I can see that. We found an empty bench and sat down. Alina leaned against me, and for the first time in weeks, she looked relaxed. Thank you, she said. For what? For being patient. For not running when things got hard. For proving that maybe I was wrong about a lot of things. Like what? Like thinking love had an expiration date. Like thinking I was too old to feel this way. Like thinking happiness was something that happened to other people. I kissed the top of her head. You were definitely wrong about that. We sat there until the sun started setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. When we finally stood to leave, she took my hand without hesitation. We walked back to my truck, fingers linked, and I realized something had shifted. We weren't hiding anymore. At home that evening, I saw her standing on her front porch. She waved and I waved back. Mrs. Chen drove by, slowing down like always, but this time Alina didn't look away. She kept her eyes on me, smiling. Later, she texted me, "Come over tomorrow." "I'm making dinner," I responded. "What time? Does it matter?" "Not really. Then come whenever." The doors open. I fell asleep that night feeling lighter than I had in months. Love didn't need anyone's permission. It just needed 2 people willing to stand in the light and call it what it was. Real.